The air was thin and hot, the way it always is in August when the sun bleaches the sky to a pale, hazy blue. My son Liam held my arm, his grip too tight, a counterfeit of concern. His palm was slick with sweat against my skin. He was nervous. Good. He should be. His wife, Chloe, walked ahead of us, her heels sinking slightly into the dusty path, an unnatural sound in the profound quiet of the desert. She turned back and smiled at me, her teeth a perfect, predatory white against her carefully tanned skin. "You'll be so much more comfortable here, Mom," she said, her voice a silken melody that had long ago curdled in my ears. "Away from all the noise. Just peace and quiet for you to rest." The words were a practiced balm, meant to soothe a child, not a woman who had lived 81 years. They thought they were leaving a confused old woman in the middle of nowhere to fade away. They believed their own narrative, the one they had carefully constructed over the past 2 years, whispered at family gatherings, and murmured over concerned phone calls to my doctor. "She's getting so forgetful. She wanders. We are worried she'll hurt herself." They weren't leaving me to die. They were leaving me to begin. The cabin door groaned open, a familiar sound, a lament I understood. Chloe bustled inside, performing a pantomime of care, running a manicured finger over a dusty shelf and tutting. "Oh, it's a little rustic, but it has good bones. Your husband built this, didn't he, Alara?" She used my first name. She always did when she was asserting her dominance, erasing the title of mother that connected me to the son she now owned. I said nothing. I let my gaze drift around the single room, my silence their confirmation of my supposed decline. Liam carried in a small duffel bag and placed it on the simple cot. "We've packed some things for you, Mom. Enough for a few weeks. We'll be back to check on you before you know it." His eyes wouldn't meet mine. They darted from the stone fireplace to the boarded-up window, to the thick wooden door, anywhere but my face. He saw a frail old woman. He saw a burden. He did not see the architect of his future. The key to the cabin, the one they had taken from my purse weeks ago, was now in Chloe's hand. She placed it on the rough-hewn wooden table in the center of the room. A symbol of their supposed generosity. "See? We are not locking you in. You're free." Free to do what? Die of dehydration, while trying to walk 20 miles to the nearest paved road. Free to be taken by the coyotes, or the cold of the desert night. They said their goodbyes. Chloe's was a dry kiss on my cheek, her perfume an acrid cloud in the clean air. Liam's was a clumsy, desperate hug. I felt a tremor run through him, a final, pathetic flicker of conscience. I remained still, a statue of acquiescence. I let them see what they needed to see, a vacant stare, a slight tremble in my hand, a pliant body that did not resist. I watched them walk away, their silhouettes shrinking against the vast, indifferent landscape. The sound of their car engine starting was a violation, a mechanical roar that ripped the silence. Then, it faded, and the silence returned, deeper and more complete than before. It wrapped around me like a familiar blanket. I stood motionless in the center of the room for a long time, just listening. I listened to the house settle. I listened to the scuttling of a lizard outside the door. I listened to the sound of my own slow, steady breathing. The performance was over. The audience was gone. I walked to the door and pressed my palm flat against the warm wood. The sun had heated it to a pleasant temperature. I felt the grain, the solid reality of it. This was David's work. This was my home. I turned the deadbolt. The solid clack echoed in the quiet room. It was not the sound of imprisonment. It was the sound of a vault being secured. I was not locked in. They were locked out. The cabin was not just a structure of wood and stone, it was a vessel of memory, a testament to a life lived with intention. I let my fingers trail along the mantelpiece, a single, massive beam of juniper that David and I had hauled from a wash 3 miles away. He had sanded it for weeks until it was as smooth as river stone. Every knot, every whirl in the grain told a story. I remembered the sweat on his brow, the laughter in his eyes as we wrestled it into place. "This will outlast us, Ilara," he had said, his voice full of a quiet, certain pride. "This is our anchor." He was right. It had outlasted him. And now, it would anchor me. I walked the perimeter of the room, my movements slow and deliberate, no longer the shuffling gait I adopted for Chloe and Liam. This was a reacquaintance, a reaffirmation. The air smelled of dust, old pine, and the faint, lingering scent of wood smoke from a fire lit years ago. They saw neglect, I saw patina. They saw decay, I saw history. Their world was one of sterile surfaces and fleeting trends. My world was built of things that endure. I went to the duffel bag Liam had left on the cot. I unzipped it with a steady hand. Inside, a collection of insults. A large print book of simple crossword puzzles. A nightgown made of a cheap, scratchy synthetic material. A bottle of multivitamins for seniors, the child-proof cap a cruel joke. And a framed photo of Liam, Chloe, and my granddaughter, Lily, taken at a theme park. My face was not in the picture. It was a clear message: this is the family now. You are outside of it. I took the photo out and stared at it. Chloe's brilliant, empty smile. Liam's forced joviality. And Lily, my sweet Lily, her eyes wide and her smile small, a captive in their glittering, hollow life. I felt a pang, not of sadness, but of fierce, protective anger. I placed the frame face down on the cot. I would not grant them an audience in my sanctuary. At the bottom of the bag, I found what I knew would be there. A small, velvet pouch. Inside was my own small victory, a seed of my rebellion planted weeks ago. It was not my regular medication, which they had diligently packed in a daily dispenser. It was a tiny roll of plastic, wrapped around a small metal object. I unrolled it. A key. Not to this cabin. Not to my house in the city they were already preparing to sell. It was a key to a post office box in the small town of dusty mesas and quiet lives, a town called Harmony. A town they didn't know I had visited 3 months ago. My true supplies were not in their bag of insults. They were here, waiting for me. David had been a man who believed in preparation, a man who had lived through leaner times. He distrusted banks and easy comforts. In the corner of the cabin, behind a stack of firewood that had sat untouched for a decade, was a loose flagstone. I knelt, my knees protesting only slightly, and worked my fingers into the crack. The stone lifted easily. Beneath it was a small, dry cellar, a space no bigger than a coffin. But it was not a tomb, it was an ark. It was lined with metal to keep out the rodents and the damp. Inside, neatly stacked, were tins of food, jars of preserved water, medical supplies, batteries, blankets, and a heavy, cast-iron box. This was our refuge, the one we had built for a world that might fall apart. It turned out the world that fell apart was simply my own family. I opened the box. Inside, another key, the one to David's old truck, hidden deep in a thicket of mesquite a half-mile from here. A compass. A set of topographical maps. And a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon. David's letters to me. I took a deep breath, the dry, cool air of the cellar filling my lungs. They had left me with a bag of puzzles and a cheap nightgown. David had left me with the tools for survival. The contest was never even close. My plan did not spring into existence in that moment of defiant solitude. It had been growing for months, a slow, quiet root taking hold in the darkness of their escalating campaign of concern. It began the day Chloe suggested, with that bright, brittle cheerfulness, that I should grant her power of attorney. Just to make things easier, Ilara, she'd chirped, placing a sheaf of papers on my kitchen table. So I can help with the bills. You shouldn't have to worry about these things. I had looked at my son, expecting him to intervene, to see the transparent avarice in his wife's eyes. But Liam had just stared at the floral pattern on the tablecloth, his shoulders slumped in defeat. He was already lost to me then, entangled in a web of debt and ambition that Chloe expertly wove. That was the day I stopped seeing them as family and started seeing them as adversaries. I signed their papers, my hand performing the slight, age-appropriate tremor they expected. And that night, I made a call to a man whose name I had kept in my address book for 30 years, Arthur Avery, David's old friend and my lawyer. Now, in the cabin's silence, I retrieved my true toolkit. From the pocket of the worn tweed jacket I'd insisted on wearing despite the heat, an act they'd dismissed as senile eccentricity, I pulled out a small, leather-bound journal and a slender fountain pen. This was my ledger, my book of reckonings. I sat at the table David had built, the same table where Chloe had placed the key as a final act of condescension, and I opened it. The first page was already filled. April 12th, C and L, visit. Propose power of attorney. L says business is slow. C admires my pearl necklace. I signed the document. 4:15 p.m. I had feigned confusion about the document's contents, asking them to explain it to me 3 times. Chloe had done so with the strained patience of a saint. I had recorded her exact words. The next entry, May 3rd, pearl necklace is missing from my jewelry box. C helps me look for it, suggests I must have misplaced it. You know how things just vanish these days, dear. I had not misplaced it. I had seen it on her own neck a week later, at a dinner party she didn't think I knew about. A friend had sent me a photo. I chronicled it all. The time they lowered the thermostat in my house to a dangerously cold temperature, claiming the old one was broken and the new digital one was tricky. The time Liam helped me with my online banking and a significant sum was transferred to his account, an error he profusely apologized for, calling it a clumsy mistake. Each entry was neat, dated, and devoid of emotion. It was a collection of facts, a litany of 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed me of my autonomy and my assets. They thought my mind was a sieve. They had no idea it was a steel trap. The sun began to set, painting the western sky in hues of violent orange and soft lavender. The light streamed through the dusty window panes, illuminating the particles of dust dancing in the air like tiny, silent witnesses. I uncapped the pen. The nib scratched against the paper, a satisfying, tactile sound. August 14th, C and L, drive me to the desert cabin. Left at 2:30 p.m. Stated intention, a quiet rest. Actual intention, abandonment. I described the car, the route they took, the items they packed, the words they spoke. I wrote with a clarity and precision that would have terrified them. They had built their case against me on a foundation of lies, on the fiction of my incompetence. I was building my case against them on a foundation of cold, hard, and meticulously documented truth. The desert outside was growing dark, the heat of the day giving way to a coming chill. But inside the cabin, a flame had been lit. I was not just surviving, I was preparing. I was not a victim, I was a strategist. And the game had only just begun. The first few days were a ritual of reclamation. I rose with the sun, my body falling into the old rhythms this place demanded. The ache in my joints was a familiar companion, not a debilitating foe. I moved with purpose, sweeping the floor not just to clean it, but to feel the satisfying scrape of the broom, to physically impose my will upon the space. I washed the windows until the desert landscape outside appeared in sharp, brilliant focus. This was not a chore, it was an act of defiance. Each clear pane of glass was a rejection of the fog they tried to surround me with. I was wiping away their narrative, letting the truth shine in. On the second day, I turned my attention to a large, sea-worn trunk that sat at the foot of the cot, a piece David had salvaged from a shipwreck story he loved to tell. It had always served as storage for extra blankets and linens. Chloe and Liam had never bothered to look inside. Their lack of curiosity was their greatest weakness. They saw only the surface of things, the frail old woman, the dusty cabin. They never thought to look deeper. I lifted the heavy lid. The scent of cedar and thyme rose to meet me. Beneath the blankets lay David's boxes. Not junk, but his organized archives. He was a man who saved everything that mattered. Old maps, geological surveys, books on desert flora and fauna. And at the very bottom, a metal box secured with a simple latch. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were his letters. Not the romantic letters of our youth, but the letters he wrote to me during the last year of his life, when he knew his time was short. He had been fighting his own battle then, and he was trying to prepare me for mine. My hands trembled slightly as I untied the ribbon. This was different from the cool detachment of my ledger. This was sacred ground. I pulled out the top letter, the paper soft and worn from my own previous readings. His handwriting was a strong, architectural script, weakened slightly by his illness, but still fundamentally his. My dearest Elara, it began. If you are reading this, it means the wolves are at the door. I have seen the way the wind is blowing. Do not mistake their pity for kindness. It is a tool, nothing more. They will try to make you small, to make you doubt the landscape of your own mind. They will tell you that your memories are ghosts, that your strength is an illusion. Do not believe them. I had to stop and close my eyes, breathing through the sudden, sharp ache in my chest. It was as if he were in the room with me, his voice a low murmur against the silence. I continued reading. You are not the sand, Elara. You are the rock it blows against. You are the juniper that holds fast to the cliffside. This place, this cabin, it is not just wood and stone. It is proof. We built it with our own hands. That is a truth they cannot erase. When they try to take it from you, remember the weight of the stones in your hands, the sweat on your brow. Remember your own power. It is quieter than theirs, but it runs deeper. It is in the earth. He had foreseen it all. The subtle erosion, the campaign to diminish me. He knew the character of his own son, the weakness that Chloe would so masterfully exploit. And he knew me. He knew the quiet resilience that lay dormant beneath my gentle exterior. The letter ended with a sentence that became my mantra, my call to arms. Do not let them write your final chapter. Hold the pen yourself. I folded the letter with reverent care and placed it on the table, next to my journal. It was my shield. It was my sword. The knowledge that he had seen, that he had known, was a profound validation. I was not imagining their cruelty. I was not succumbing to paranoia. I was a sentry, and David had given me my watch orders. He had left me a map not just of the terrain, but of the treachery I would have to navigate. The cabin had no phone line and no internet. A fact Chloe had confirmed with smug satisfaction on the drive up. No one will bother you out here, she had said. Total peace, they had counted on my isolation. It was the cornerstone of their plan. A confused old woman, cut off from the world, would be helpless. But David was a man who loved redundancies. He was a pilot, a sailor, a man who understood that the simplest, most reliable technologies were often the best. Against the far wall, behind a faded calico curtain, was a shelf of his old radio equipment. To any normal eye, it was a relic, a dusty collection of dials and wires. But I knew what it was. A Hallicrafter's shortwave radio, powered by a car battery that David kept perpetually charged by a small, discreet solar panel on the roof. It was our ultimate emergency communication, a system that relied on the sky, not on a fragile wire stretched across miles of empty desert. It had been years since I'd used it, but the knowledge was embedded in my fingers. a muscle memory forged in long nights when David would scan the airwaves, pulling voices out of the ether from ships at sea and distant stations. I uncovered the unit, wiping away a thick layer of dust. I attached the battery terminals, the clips sparking for a second. I flipped the switch. A low hum filled the cabin, and the display glowed with a soft, amber light. It was alive. I put on the heavy headphones, the worn leather cool against my skin. At first, there was only static, the sound of the universe whispering to itself. I began to turn the dial, my movements slow and precise. I was not searching randomly. I was hunting for a specific frequency, one that Ben, the old park ranger, had monitored for 40 years. Ben was our friend, a man as steady and weathered as the mesas he patrolled. We had an agreement, a simple code for an emergency. A way to signal for help without broadcasting panic. The hours passed. I listened to snippets of conversations in Spanish from across the border, the strange, rhythmic beeps of maritime weather stations, the faint strains of music from a forgotten era. My back ached. My eyes were tired. But I held fast to my task. David's words echoed in my mind. Patience, Ilara. The desert teaches patience. Then, I heard it. A crackle, a break in the static, and a voice, as familiar and comforting as the call of a cactus wren. Kilo Charlie 7 Bravo. Standing by. All quiet on the western front, it was Ben. His nightly sign-off. My heart leaped. I grabbed the microphone, my thumb pressing the transmit button. I took a steadying breath. My voice, when it came out, was clear and calm. Ben, this is Wren's Nest. Do you copy? There was a pause, a burst of static. Then his voice, closer now, sharper. Wren's Nest, I copy. It's been a long time, Ilara. Everything all right? I chose my words carefully. Our code was simple, based on birds. We were the wrens. The threat was the eagles. The eagles have flown the nest, I said. The wren is just checking the foundations. All seems solid for now. Another pause. I could picture him in his small ranger station, leaning forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. He understood. I wasn't in immediate physical danger, but something was wrong. Understood, Wren's Nest, he said, his voice now stripped of its casual tone, replaced with a quiet gravity. I'll be doing a perimeter check on the East Ridge at sunrise. In my personal vehicle. Might see some interesting geology. He had just told me when and where he would be, and that he would be coming unofficially. I had made contact. The first thread of my web had been cast, connecting my island of isolation back to the world. I signed off, turned off the radio, and sat back in the profound silence. They thought they had left me in a cage. They had no idea I was sitting in the cockpit. As the days settled into a routine of quiet purpose, my mind was a whirlwind of logistics. A calm sea on the surface with powerful currents moving beneath. I was waiting for Ben, but I was not idle. In the quiet hours of the afternoon, when the heat was at its most oppressive and the world outside seemed to shimmer and warp, I would take out Lily's drawing. I'd found it crumpled in the pocket of the old tweed jacket, a forgotten treasure. I smoothed it out on the table, the childish crayon lines a stark and beautiful contrast to the grim entries in my ledger. It was a picture of the two of us, standing in front of this very cabin. She had drawn me with a huge smile and wild, grey hair that stood out like a dandelion cloud. She had drawn herself holding my hand, her stick-figure body leaning into mine. Above us, a giant, yellow sun with a happy face rained down squiggly lines of light. In the corner, in the laborious, uneven script of a 6-year-old, she had written, "Grammar is my home." My home. Not the house in the city they were trying to steal, not this cabin. Me? I was her home. The simple, profound truth of it struck me with the force of a physical blow. This was not just about property. It was not just about vengeance or justice. It was about legacy. What kind of world would I leave for Lily? One where greed wins, where the vulnerable are cast aside, where family is just a word used to mask exploitation. Or one where strength is found in quiet dignity, where truth prevails, and where love is a fortress that cannot be breached. They had tried to frame me as a danger to myself, but the real danger was to Lily. The real poison was the example Chloe and Liam were setting for her, that love is conditional, that elders are disposable, and that wealth is the ultimate measure of a person's worth. I would not let that be her inheritance. This small, creased piece of paper became my compass. Whenever a wave of doubt or weariness washed over me, I would look at it. I would see the trust in my granddaughter's drawing, the unconditional love in her simple statement. I was her home. And you do not allow termites to eat your foundation. You do not allow thieves to steal your deed. You protect your home with everything you have. I placed the drawing next to David's letter. One was a map of the past, the other a charter for the future. Together, they were my constitution, the founding documents of my quiet rebellion. While sorting through another of David's meticulously organized boxes, this one filled with old financial records and warranties for appliances long since discarded, my fingers brushed against a small, stiff envelope I didn't recognize. It was tucked into the back of a file labeled property taxes. It wasn't a letter. It was a professional photograph, the kind taken in a sterile studio. The photo was of Chloe. But not the Chloe I knew. This was a younger version, perhaps in her early 20s. Her hair was different, her clothes less expensive, but the eyes were the same. Cold, appraising, and utterly devoid of warmth. She was standing next to an older man, his arm possessively around her waist. He was smiling, but it was a smug, unpleasant expression. On the back of the photo, in David's neat script, was a name and a date. The man's name was Alistair Finch. The date was from 15 years ago. David had also written a short note, met him at a conference. He warned me. Said she was a predator, who attached herself to men with money and ailing parents. Said she bled his family dry. Keep an eye on Liam. My breath caught in my throat. David had known. He had received a warning from a past victim, and had been watching, even then. He hadn't told me, I realized, not to keep a secret, but to protect me from worry, to carry the burden of that knowledge himself. He had been quietly gathering his own intelligence, preparing for a war he hoped would never come. And he had left this breadcrumb for me, another piece of the puzzle, another weapon for my arsenal. I looked at the photograph again, at the young, hungry shark smiling for the camera. Alistair Finch. A name. A lead. Another fact for my ledger. Another nail for the coffin they were building for themselves. At dawn on the 5th day, I was awake and watching. I sat by the newly cleaned window, a mug of hot, black coffee warming my hands. The eastern sky was a pale, bruised purple, slowly giving way to a ribbon of fiery orange at the horizon. The desert was still and cold. Just as the first rays of sun crested the jagged ridge to the east, I saw it. Not a plume of dust from the main track, but a subtle movement on the old, overgrown service road. A dark green truck, its paint faded and dull, blending in with the juniper and scrub oak. It was Ben. He didn't drive toward the cabin. He parked about a quarter of a mile away, got out, and began to walk along the ridgeline, just as he'd said he would, a pair of binoculars to his eyes, performing the perfect imitation of a ranger observing his territory. I gave him 10 minutes, then I slipped out the back door of the cabin, a canvas bag over my shoulder, and began my own walk, heading away from him, toward a small, sheltered arroyo. It was a silent, careful dance, two old friends moving with practiced ease across a landscape they both knew intimately. We met in the cool shade of a rock overhang, hidden from view of the cabin or the road. Ben was a man of few words. He looked me over, his gaze sharp and assessing. "You look tired, Alara," he said, his voice a low rumble. "But your eyes are clear." It was the highest of compliments. He didn't ask for the whole story. He didn't need it. He trusted me. "The eagles think the wren has a broken wing," I said simply. He nodded, a grim set to his jaw. "Time to show them she has claws." He handed me a heavy-duty satellite phone. "Fully charged. Call who you need to call. No one's listening on this." Then he handed me a thick manila envelope, sealed and bearing the logo of a law firm. "Mr. Avery sent this. He said you'd know what to do." My lawyer. My quiet, methodical lawyer, Arthur, who had been patiently waiting for my signal. I opened the envelope. Inside was a stack of legal documents, crisp and imposing. A new will, revoking the old one that had named Liam as the primary beneficiary. A durable power of attorney, naming Arthur himself as my agent, immediately revoking the one I had given to Chloe. And papers for the establishment of a trust, the Lily David Trust, into which all my major assets, the house, the savings, the investments, would be transferred, with Arthur as the trustee and Lily as the sole beneficiary upon her 25th birthday. Chloe and Liam's names were nowhere to be seen. Ben had also brought a small, portable printer, and a power inverter that could run off his truck battery. "Avery said you'd need to sign things. Said you'd need a witness," he gestured to himself. For the next hour, in the cool shade of the arroyo, the modern world of law and finance asserted itself in the ancient desert. I spoke with Arthur on the satellite phone, my voice calm and firm as I gave my final instructions. He was all business, his tone conveying a deep, righteous anger on my behalf. "They've made a grave error, Alara," he said. A very grave error indeed. Under his telephonic guidance, I signed each document. My signature was not the wavering, uncertain script of an old woman. It was bold and decisive. Each stroke of the pen was a severance, a cutting of ties, a reclaiming of my name and my life. Ben signed as the witness, his own signature, as solid and dependable as he was. He notarized the documents with a portable stamp he carried in his ranger kit. It was all legal. It was all binding. It was all done. The trap was set. All that was left was for the prey to walk into it. I handed the original, signed documents back to Ben. He would drive them to the nearest city and courier them overnight to Arthur's office. The machinery of justice was now in motion. When I walked back to the cabin, the sun was high in the sky, but the oppressive heat no longer bothered me. I felt a profound sense of peace. I had held the pen. I had written my own chapter. The waiting was the hardest part. The legal wheels were turning hundreds of miles away, but in the cabin, time seemed to stretch and slow. I knew they would be back. Chloe's plan would require a body, or at the very least, a formal declaration of my disappearance. She was too meticulous to leave loose ends. I imagined her checking her calendar, marking the days, calculating the optimal time to return and feign a horrified discovery. This quiet interlude was a gift. I used it to prepare the cabin, not as a home to be lived in, but as a stage to be set. Every action was deliberate, infused with meaning. I packed a single, small bag. Into it went David's letters, Lily's drawing, my journal, a change of clothes, and the few small mementos that truly mattered, David's old silver compass, a smooth, heart-shaped stone from our favorite beach, the photo of the predator Chloe used to be. The rest was just stuff. Things that could be owned and therefore, things that could be lost. I had learned the difference between possessions and treasures. Then, I began to clean. I scrubbed the floors, polished the furniture, and aired out the blankets. I was not just tidying up. I was erasing them. I was purifying the space of their brief, toxic presence. I wanted them to return to a place that was impeccably kept, a silent, irrefutable testament to the clarity and competence of the woman they had left for dead. A home, not a tomb. I laid a fire in the hearth, ready to be lit. I placed a book on the small table beside the armchair, a volume of poetry by Mary Oliver, open to a page I had marked. I wanted them to see evidence of a life being lived, of a mind engaged and at peace. My final act of stagecraft was the most important. I took out a single sheet of fine, cream-colored stationery I had brought with me, tucked inside my journal. I sat at the table and uncapped my fountain pen. I would not fill the page with accusations or rage. That was their language, the language of messy, loud emotion. My power was in my stillness, my clarity. The letter was to both of them, but my words were for Liam. Chloe was a lost cause, a barren field where nothing good could grow. But Liam, somewhere inside him was the boy I had raised. He deserved to know the truth, not as an excuse, but as a final, stark lesson. The letter was short. Liam and Chloe, it began. I have decided to take a longer vacation. This cabin, which your father and I built with our own hands, has reminded me of what it means to be strong and self-sufficient. I have made some new arrangements for my affairs, to ensure that my future, and Lily's, are secure. The details will be made clear to you by my lawyer, Mr. Arthur Avery. He will be in touch shortly. Do not try to find me. The key you left on the table is yours to keep. It no longer fits any lock that matters to me. I paused, then added one final line, a single sentence for my son. Your father would have been so disappointed, Liam. I signed it simply, Elara. No mom, no mother, just the name of the woman they had underestimated. I folded the letter and placed it in the center of the table. Next to it, I set a single teacup, one of the cheap, plain ones they had left. It was empty. A symbol of the hospitality they would no longer receive, the nourishment they would no longer get from me. Everything was ready. I took one last look around the cabin, my sanctuary, my fortress. It had served its purpose. I closed the door quietly behind me, leaving it unlocked. There was nothing left inside for anyone to steal. My bag was on my shoulder. The sun was beginning its descent. I walked toward the west, into the setting sun, not looking back. From the high vantage point of the eastern ridge, the cabin below looked like a child's toy. Ben had picked me up at our prearranged spot, and now we sat in the cab of his truck, the engine off, the windows down. The silence of the desert had returned, vast and peaceful. We shared a thermos of coffee, a comfortable quiet between us. We waited. And just as dusk began to bleed purple and grey across the sky, we saw them. A cloud of dust on the main track, growing steadily larger. A sleek, silver SUV, glinting in the last of the sun's rays. It felt intrusive, alien in this landscape. They drove right up to the cabin, braking sharply. The doors opened. Chloe emerged first, her movements sharp and impatient. She was dressed in practical, expensive hiking gear that looked like it had never seen a trail. Liam got out on the driver's side, his shoulders slumped, his movements slow. He looked haggard, smaller than I remembered. The desert had already diminished him. They stood for a moment, staring at the cabin. I could imagine their thoughts. Chloe, annoyed that she had to go through with this charade. Liam, dreading what he might find inside. There was no sign of life. The chimney was cold. The windows were dark. This was what they had expected. This was the scene they had come to discover. Chloe strode to the door and pushed it open, not bothering to knock. She disappeared inside. Liam hesitated for a long moment, his hand on the door frame, a man on a threshold he was terrified to cross. Then he followed her in. Ben passed me his binoculars. I raised them to my eyes, the glass cool against my skin. The image jumped into focus. Through the clean window, I had a clear view of the main room. I saw Chloe stop dead in the center of the cabin. Her back was rigid. She took in the impeccable cleanliness, the neatly stacked firewood, the open book of poetry. This was wrong. This was not part of the plan. I saw her eyes dart around the room, searching for signs of decay, of chaos. There were none. Then she saw the letter on the table. She snatched it up. I watched her read it, her body growing stiffer with every line. Her face, even from this distance, was a mask of disbelief, which quickly curdled into pure, unadulterated fury. She spun around, thrusting the letter at Liam, who had been standing helplessly by the door. He took it, his hands shaking. I focused the binoculars on my son. I watched his face as he read the words I had written for him. I saw his eyes widen. I saw the blood drain from his face. He looked up from the letter, his gaze lost and horrified. He looked around the cabin as if seeing it for the first time, not as a dumping ground for his mother, but as a home. He looked at the empty teacup. He looked at the cold fireplace. He finally understood. He understood the depth of his betrayal and the totality of his loss. He staggered back a step, leaning against the wall for support. Chloe began to pace, a caged animal. Her polished composure had shattered. She was gesturing wildly, her voice inaudible, but her rage palpable. Liam didn't respond. He just stood there, holding the piece of paper that had dismantled his life. He looked broken. Not by me, but by the weight of his own weakness, the final, crushing realization of what he had done. I lowered the binoculars. I had seen enough. Ben put a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Ilara, I nodded, a single, slow nod. I felt no triumph. No joy. Just a vast, quiet, and somber sense of release. He started the truck, and we drove away, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The sun had set. The desert was dark. My new home is small, but the windows are large, and they face the mountains. The sunlight spills across the floorboards in the morning, and I have filled the sills with pots of geraniums and herbs. It is a quiet life, a peaceful one. Arthur handled everything. The legal fallout was, as he put it, a swift and merciless affair. Chloe and Liam, faced with irrefutable evidence of financial malfeasance and the testimony of Alistair Finch's family, which Arthur's investigators had quickly located, did not fight. They collapsed. They sold the big house to cover their debts. Liam lost his business. Their glittering world dissolved into a mire of litigation and recriminations. I receive updates from Arthur, factual and brief. I do not ask for them. I hear they moved away, somewhere smaller, somewhere cheaper. I do not know if they are still together. I find I do not care. My only stipulation in the entire process was the establishment of a supervised visitation schedule with Lily. I see her every other weekend. She arrives, her small face bright with joy, and we spend our time in the garden, or baking cookies, or simply reading stories. I am her home, and she is mine. The cycle of love continues, unbroken. The legacy is secure. And now, I want to speak to you. Yes, you. The one listening to my story. You may feel that you are in the autumn of your life, that the world sees you as someone to be managed, to be gently set aside. They may pat your hand and call you dear, their voices laced with a condescension that feels like a shroud. They will talk about you as if you are not in the room. They will make decisions for you, believing they know what is best. They will see your wrinkles as a sign of frailty, your silence as a sign of confusion, your memories as a sign of decline. They will try to take your keys. They will try to shrink your world down to the size of a single, manageable room. They will try to convince you that you are the sand, shifting and powerless. Do not believe them. You are the rock. You are the juniper. You are the architect of your own life, and the keeper of your own history. Your mind is not a museum of dusty relics. It is a library of wisdom, an arsenal of experience. Your silence is not emptiness, it is observation. Your stillness is not weakness, it is strategy. Do not wait for them to leave you in the desert. Begin your preparations now. Find your own allies, the ones who see your strength, not your age. Document their words, their actions. Keep your own ledger. Remember the power of the pen, the quiet, irrefutable authority of the written word. Secure your foundations, legally and emotionally. Know the difference between your possessions and your treasures. And never, ever let them write your final chapter. Your story is not over. It is yours to tell, in your own voice, on your own terms. Protect your cabin. Whatever it may be, your home, your art, your independence, your spirit. Protect it with the quiet, unyielding power of a life fully lived. And know that even in the harshest wilderness, you have everything you need to survive. You have yourself,